Our X-Files. Welcome to our X-Files vault. Regular people talking about unexplained phenomena. UFOs. Ghosts. Cryptids. Hidden archaeology. Weird science. Our stories. Our takes. Our X-Files vault.
Hi, welcome to the Paranormal Conspiracy or Paracon podcast. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Callan. And this week we're going to be looking at something that doesn't get quite the notoriety it deserves. It's the Alaskan Triangle, sometimes known as Alaska's Bermuda Triangle for reasons that we'll get into. It's a mysterious, mostly untouched region in the frontier state where people go missing at an alarming rate.
The area gained public attention in 1972 when a small private plane carrying House Majority Leader Hale Boggs, Alaska Congressman Nick Begich, and aide Russell Brown, their Bush pilot Don Johns.
Don Johns, of course.
That's not a fake name, ladies and gentlemen. Don Johns seemingly vanished into thin air while flying from Anchorage to Juneau. For more than a month, 50 civilian planes, 40 military aircraft, plus dozens of boats covered a search area of 32,000 square miles, but no trace of the plane, men, wreckage, or debris were ever found. Did the disappearances begin at this time, or is this simply when we began to notice?
And also worth noting about that, we talked a little bit off camera, or a lot off camera, about this specifically, but that seems like a weird ratio there, 50 civilian planes and 40 military aircraft. Plus
yeah, definitely. I mean, people could argue that, one military plane is worth 10 civilian aircrafts, I'm sure, because these civilian aircrafts are probably just simple bush planes to, twin engine little bushcraft pilot little planes that maybe the typical person who owns a plane in Alaska owns, I guess. But still, to show that there was a lack when a government official, someone of this country at least, I know you're in Canada, but here in America, you would think that your congressman and someone who is the House Majority Leader, especially, I don't know for what party Hale Boggs was House Majority Leader for, but you would think that the party would still want to be putting some effort, real effort, into finding any sign of a plane crash, like nothing. It just seems almost baffling to me that that's the case. But so
it seems like a big number at first when we're thinking about Alaska in the early 70s. 90 planes, combing the area for over a month. But to be outnumbered by civilian planes, I would think that there'd be, maybe not even that many civilian planes in Alaska at that time. I don't know.
I mean, these numbers aren't even touching on the number of boats, cars, and people on foot. I mean, those numbers aren't even mentioned in the sources that we touched, but we're like, seriously, the fact that it just almost seems like off the base of the number when you look at it. 50 civilian planes, 40 military aircraft. I don't know, it just sounds like almost like lackadaisical effort on the military's part. Makes it almost open to the fact that there could be conspiracies to someone wanting these people gone, They didn't find them for a reason, you could say. But, that's just me. That's just me saying that.
No, yeah, it's fair. It's a fair thing to be suspicious of. Putting it into perspective, since 1988, so 16 years after that incident you just described, more than 16,000 people have disappeared, specifically in the bounds of the Alaska Triangle, which we haven't really touched on yet. But to break down what we're talking about when we say the Alaska Triangle, roughly a triangle of mostly wilderness, the interior land space of Alaska, probably about half the state, I would say, made between Barrow, Anchorage, and Juneau is this roughly defined triangle. So 16,000 people. The missing person rate is then twice the national average for Alaska, is what it boils down to. And there's plenty of recorded cases that existed prior to 1988. As Patrick just mentioned, we've got a big initiator there in 72, but this is just when the figures really started to become alarming. 16 years later, 16,000 people since, and twice the national average.
And I got to touch on this too. People go missing at an alarming rate here in the frontier state, and that's for a reason. It's one of the most harshest wildernesses on the planet, next to Siberia. Okay, which, you know, around 100,000 years ago, we were connected through the Bering Land Bridge. So you have to realize that these harsh wildernesses are not for the light of heart. People die here every day, and for a level of people who go missing, for instance, it's on average 600,000 people in the United States go missing a year, and a large amount of those people come back. But that is not to speak for Alaska. A large percentage of the people who go missing in Alaska are not found. Alaskan search parties go out for people all the time, and they don't find people, because this is not, people get snowed over, people get eaten by bears, people get eaten by packs of wolves, they drown, they get snagged on fishing lines. Things happen to people out here, and it is definitely not to say that there aren't unexplained phenomena that this is what we're touching on here. But seriously, it's a dangerous place out here in Alaska. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're talking about reported numbers of the population. To go back to something that we briefly brought up between us before we started recording, it's just now August, and I believe we looked it up. The statistic was roughly 600 people missing so far this year.
I'm pretty sure it's actually 300 and something, like 399 people or something like that.
399. I'm not sure where I got 600 from, but either way, that still gives me enough to make my point. Extrapolating towards the end of the year, it puts things a lot closer to 1,000 a year than it was in the past, if we're breaking down that 16,000 missing since 1988 is clearly less than 1,000. So that tells me while missing persons accounts are probably going down in number by some reports based on advances in technology, cell phone technology, being able to ping people, their whereabouts, connectivity in general. But not so much in Alaska. It feels like those numbers aren't fluctuating as much as they should be. They're not going down. They're maybe even going up a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. The numbers seem to only go up. Definitely there are numbers of people who are, I'm sure, found. But it's to speak to the causes of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get, to really touch on something that some of these people might think about, like, why are people going missing? I want to say something right now that I've talked about a lot off camera. This is something that people have talked about in not just popular media, but they even covered it in the movie The Fourth Kind. That's Nome, Alaska. And we asked the question, in 1972, that's like the big deal that got everyone's attention. House Majority Leader Hale Boggs going missing and their plane not being found. But since 1960 to 2004, there were 24 people missing in Nome, Alaska. Nome, Alaska being only reachable by plane. So, I don't know. To me, that seems suspicious. I wanted to say, I don't know how anyone goes missing in a place where you can only like leave by essentially either by foot or by plane, and even by foot, you're just bound to die. Really kind of weird. They touched on the fourth kind. The movie The Fourth Kind touches on the possible situation in a real case studies by a doctor by the name of
I can only assume under those circumstances, Nome, Alaska, that a lot of these cases were shut under the pretense that the elements took these people. I mean, the ever-changing landscape of drifts and things like that. I don't know exactly where it's positioned with relation to bodies of water, but that's a pretty big culprit as well. People slipping beneath the ice, frozen bodies sinking. A lot of people are never recovered because of just that. But I mean, the number still is a little bit suspicious.
And like we said you mentioned this off camera, it would be suspicious if that number hasn't gone up since 2004, we're sitting here in 2021. So that's to say something, it's been 17 years. Why, like, how many people have gone missing since then in the 17 years? If we're looking at a rate, of about, 24 people missing in the span of 38 years, about 40 something years, it just seems like seems a little strange. And this is talking about someone, a real thing, in the film's present day, Chapman University hosts a televised interview. Psychologist Abby Tyler, she describes it as a series of events that occurred in Nome, Alaska that culminate in an alleged alien abduction in October of 2000. In the reenactment of events occurring in 2000, Abby's husband, Will, is mysteriously murdered one night in his sleep, leaving her to raise two children, Ashley and Ronnie, by herself. And Abby takes hypnotherapy sessions with 3 patients who have the same experience every night. A white owl stares at them through their windows. Abby hypnotizes 2 of them, and both recount similar terrifying stories, creatures attempting to enter their homes. I mean, these situations really speak to like a lot of stuff, and this leads me to kind of touch on this topic right here. So, like the 1988 flight Japanese Airlines 1628, where Japanese plane came across 3 unidentified flying objects while traveling from Iceland to Anchorage, Alaska. According to the report, 3 UFOs chased the airplane right through the Alaskan Triangle. People on board the plane said they saw flashing lights following them, moving quickly and disappearing, showing up again in an instant. Unprecedented UFO sighting, because the account is mutually corroborated by all those on board. And also, this leads me to something as well that we found a source. I don't know if you want to touch on that, but this was actually confirmed by an FAA administrator. Anchorage Flight Control had actually seen the object that they're talking about here, and it really goes on to say like what kind of object these people in the plane were looking at.
I remember this. You've got the source in front of you, so I won't go into it. But I do want to say that it is the most astonishing part of all of this. I think is that as much coverage as it got, I don't think a lot of people have heard this story unless they're enthusiasts of the genre, unexplained mysteries. But
I know this is something
because so many people had the same experience, and officials as your resource.
Yeah, it came,
Jokes.
definitely came into my head from a memory as well. It remembered back when watching something on History Channel a long time ago when I was a kid about UFOs or something like that. This was definitely mentioned, but it's not in anywhere near talked about it like this. Right here we have from the AnchoragePress.com, November 17th of this year marks the 35th anniversary of one of the best documented UFO cases ever happened in the skies above Alaska. And so we talk about how for 50 minutes, Japanese Airlines cargo flight 1628 played tag with these three UFOs played tag with the Japanese Airlines for 50 minutes while they were visually observed by sometimes terrified flight crew. During the last 30 minutes of the UFOs were tracked on military and civilian radar. So for the last 30 minutes, military and civilian radars from flight controls on Anchorage and I believe the local air base that was close by, they said that the flying feet was about 1,000 feet from it. This is a quote right here, slightly condensed quote from the actual flight, from the captain of the flight. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. The distance from the lights was far enough from us, and we felt no immediate danger. I thought perhaps it is a UFO. The lights were still moving strangely. Most unexpectedly, two spaceships appeared directly in front of the plane. Shooting off lights, the inside cockpit shined brightly, and I felt the warmth of the UFO's thrusters on my face. Then, 3 to 7 seconds later, the fire, like from a jet engine, stopped and became a small circle of lights as they began to fly in level flight and at the same speed as we were. The middle of the body of the ship sparked an occasional stream of lights like charcoal fire. Its shape was a square flying 500 feet to 1,000 feet in front of us, very slightly higher in altitude than us. Its size was just about the same size as the body of DC-8, similar to that in size of a Boeing 747. For reference, we'll have images up there for you guys, but it is impossible for any man-made machine to make any sudden appearances in front of the jumbo jet that is flying 910 kilometers. And for my guys out here in America, let me just do the math for you real quick, just in case you don't know how fast that is.
It's incredibly fast.
It's incredibly fast, okay? That's about 565. It sounds a lot faster, but it's about 565.7 miles per hour. So to be doing that, like making maneuvers at that fast, making dips and dives, things to really spook and make these people kind of feel like they were not, at this point, they were kind of like really sketched out. That any kind of thing could be doing that, paralleling their aircraft. But yet, they were honestly just like really amazed by what they were seeing. It says that they didn't feel immediately threatened or in danger. Honestly, we were just simply astounded. I had no idea why they had come so close to us. There was a pale, white flat light in the direction where the ships flew away, pacing us. The Anchorage Center replied that they saw nothing on their radar. I set our digital weather radar distance to 20 miles, radar angle to horizon where it was, and on the screen a large green round object had appeared 7 or 8 miles away in the direction of the object. We arrived at the sky above the Eielson, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but the Eielson Air Force Base and Fairbanks. It was a clear night. We were just above the bright city lights. We checked the pale white light behind us. There was a silhouette of a gigantic spaceship. We must get away quickly. A terrified Captain Tadayuchi, in coordination with the Anchorage Center, attempted evasive maneuvers such as flying in a circle, changing altitude. The gigantic UFO, later described by Tadayuchi as the size of 2 aircraft carriers, shadowed Flight 1628 through all maneuvers. So, I mean, this is really to speak to the fact that not just that these guys see it, but then later there was, in 1986, John Callahan, an FAA Division Chief of Accidents and Investigations branch in Washington, D.C., about a week after the JL 1628 incident, got an urgent call from Alaska, and, he actually confirms that this happened. He sees that the UFO chased a 747 across the skies here for about 30 minutes or so. Told him to get all the data together. I wanted all the civilian military discs that he had on all the tapes, John says, and flown overnight the tech center where I'm sitting. Military refused to send their tapes, but he got everything Anchorage traffic control had. We told him that we wanted this room set up to be just like in Anchorage, and we wanted all the data to come to this scope radar. We want to see everything the controller has seen. We want to hear everything he heard, and we wanted it tied together. The radar, the digital radar, and the sound. So by the end of all this, we have a pretty long, extensive story that, honestly, we could do a podcast on alone, but we're not going to. That this flight in general was something that a lot of people have, and there's a lot of verifiable things. This isn't something that I can say for sure because I haven't done the research onto it, but it'd be interesting to really see if this was part of the, the declassified documents from the Pentagon in regards to UFOs, because it's just something that almost seems like, why wouldn't it be? It happened in America,
that's
right?
My initial reaction, I've heard about it before, but my initial reaction to this sort of thing is that's really wild. That's incredible that it was able to generate the attention that it did at the time. But then I won't say it faded into obscurity, but again, as I said, people aren't talking about it anymore. When it's got to be one of the most credible, and I think you used the word unprecedented. You can't even call it a UFO sighting. It's an experience. It's an interaction, and there's so many people involved and on board, and officials and releases and data, and it's not talked about.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's really to say something about that. This is why we're doing the show, guys. Honestly, for the people watching, this is why we're doing this. We want to bring this back to the consciousness of the modern world. We're not talking about this stuff enough, and it's not to say that it's global warming important, but something that we should definitely be asking questions about.
Definitely. There's people that have been dedicating their lives to this sort of thing. They've been working on it for decades. I'm going to talk a little bit right now about Ivan T. Sanderson, who, if you're into this sort of thing, it shouldn't come as a surprise. You probably recognize the name. In the 50s and 60s, he's a pretty acclaimed writer, scientist, researcher, the first real proponent of what he termed, I think he coined the term actually, vile vortices, or the multiple of vile vortex. And what these are sites all over the world that appear specifically on global electromagnetic ley lines. So ley line theory is a whole other thing that plugs right into this. But aside from that, we're not going to really get into that. There are more than a dozen triangles, so to speak, named after Bermuda Triangle, positioned at very regular intervals along these ley lines. And if you look at a map of the world, and we'll put one up on the screen if we can, and lined up these triangles at certain longitudes above and below the equator. And a lot of these triangles are historical sites where a lot of unexplained things happen. Pyramids of Giza, for example, Bermuda, Easter Island, Stonehenge, and more. Those are just the biggies. And what they all have in common, why they're called triangles or vile vortices, is well, scientifically speaking, electromagnetic and geomagnetic disturbances, so equipment fails, a wild amount of reported disappearances and strange phenomena, UFO sightings, that sort of thing. A lot of people attest to just being in these areas geographically. They are overcome with a sense of anxiety or dread that might be the electromagnetism itself, having something to do with the frequency, and that's the body's reaction to it. And we can't necessarily audibly detect it, but we're not going to break that down or get into it. It's all just to say that a lot of people believe that, although it doesn't perfectly line up, the Alaskan Triangle is one of these vital vortices. And there's not really a lot that we can say to credit that or discredit that, but it is interesting. It does fit right in. A lot of people see these sites and they seek them out. They think that they have some sort of ancient historical value. They're metaphysical energy hotspots or portals or things like that. But just speaking to what's observable and recordable, we know that there are these triangles everywhere, and that Alaska, or the Alaskan Triangle, is one of them, where a lot of these things happen. We can measure it, and we're going to barely scratch the surface here of what there is to say, how much there is to dive into with unexplained phenomena of the Alaska Triangle. Cryptids, we're not really going to touch on cryptids a lot, but there's a lot of them, a lot of the special ones native to the Alaskan Triangle. The big six we were able to look into, just to name them off, and feel free to look these up on your own, because they're all individually interesting. They could all be their own episode. Wahila is a saber wolf, giant white monstrous wolf, has its own lore. The Northern Giant is a colossal golden bear. The White Death is a name given to what's supposed to be not one, but a species, maybe a lost species of tigers, native to the region supposedly. Kushtaka, the otter man. Kualapalak is the Inuit mermaid. I know you've done a lot of reading on a couple of these, Patrick. Hornet is a little bit ambiguous whether or not it's an individual or a type of people, really. I think it goes back to land bridge times and prehistoric people. It's sort of the origin of the Sasquatch myth, maybe. Same kind of idea of a human-like.
Yeah, definitely going to touch on that in a second. Something for us to look into a little bit more.
There's so much there.
But really, I want to just take this time to kind of say, these topics remain unexplained because the facts aren't quite enough. The evidence isn't quite conclusive, and we're really just talking about them as casually as we would Opkin. Honestly, we're two guys who believe ourselves to be, we're skeptics in the subject. We find them interesting as something that, we find ourselves in a situation in this modern age where instead of just sitting on your house being bored and watching a Discovery Channel documentary, it's better for us to use this platform that the internet provides us to come out and talk to you guys and talk to the people who are interested in this discussion as well. And note extensively, emphasize this extremely, that we are not experts by any means. And many of you will know more about these topics than we do. We're counting on it for you guys to open the discussion, open the conversation. We want you to weigh in and share what you know and what sources you have in the comments, and even email us. Link will be in the description for our emails. And at some point, hopefully, we'll be able to revisit this episode and touch, and maybe even have a guest. Hopefully, in the future, we'll be able to have guests, experts on these, true experts on this, and be able to really talk about these kind of topics, because I know the people who are going to watch this, the people who are going to like this, you guys as a whole are going to be the ones who are really going to know more than us, and we want you to create this platform with us, help us build this platform together. So if you're liking what you're hearing so far, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, check out the website for blogs, announcements, featured guests. Link in the description below. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there real quick. So,
Yeah, that's good. Casual discourse, like a starting block, is I guess what we're after.
yeah, exactly. Nothing by any means is going to be too hard on anybody. But something I really want to kind of go off on real quick. I kind of just want to talk on these things that you said. You know, the Kushtaka, the Otterman, that's like, for a lot of people, what some people might consider like Alaska's Bigfoot, or Alaska's other Bigfoot. It's the Bigfoot that doesn't get talked about. It's this Otterman. If any of you guys are interested in that, I really highly suggest looking at the series on History Channel, I believe it's called. It is called the Alaskan Triangle. And it's where, you know, I'm not going to talk about the Qualapalik or the Kushtaka on too much extent, because you guys can go check those out. And, you know, that's where I would find most of my information on this kind of stuff on a normal basis, rather than that actually doing the deep dives that I did to find about these other topics that I want to talk about. One of them being the Tornit. The Tornit really got me going, because this is another Sasquatch thing that you could talk about. But this is like the proto-Sasquatch. This is the Sasquatch before Sasquatches. And it touches back to the legends of the people who crossed the Bering Land Bridge. Sorry about that. The Bering Land Bridge, these early humans who first touched North America, and these are the people who first ended up inhabiting what is North America. That's a pretty intense thing to think about when you think, you know, the earliest legends talk of this person, the Tornit, and say, you know, I'm going to read right now from cryptids.fandom.com right now, but the Tornit are a race of wild men in Inuit mythology, according to the Anchorage Daily. The stories of the Alaska Bushmen, or Tornits, have been told since the first humans crossed the Bering Land Bridge. And in the beginning, the story goes, the Inuit and the Tornits lived peacefully in villages near each other and shared common hunting ground. You know, hearing that right off the bat makes me think, as someone who's really into genealogy, and, you know, I've done a little 23andMe test here, but to see that, you know, I found myself having like a large amount of Neanderthal DNA. And Neanderthal being an archaic hominid that interbred with Homo sapiens a long time ago, around, you know, 40,000 to 60,000 years ago is when we were mating with them. It kind of leads me to think, would there not be, especially on how we see, if, you know, you're anyone out there who believes in evolution, you know, evolution talks about animals really adapting, overcoming, and surviving their environments. And hominids in general, you know, we lost our hair. Primates lost our hair for many of reasons that we could theorize. Some say we lost it because we were in a hot climate. Some say we lost it because of the ability for fishing and swimming, made us better swimmers. But who's to say that when we, you know, migrated up into these colder areas like the Siberian tundra and the Alaskan tundra on the Bering Land Bridge, that we didn't acquire new adaptations? This is purely conjecture from my part, but to say on the Tornit race being a race of wild men, bushmen, that Inuit people from Inuit mythology say were, you know, a race of people that were slightly less advanced than them, and they ended up dying out because of a situation. You know, they could use kayaks in the legend. They could use kayaks, but they couldn't build kayaks. So one day, a big old bulky dumbass Tornit used one of our Inuits' kayaks and broke it, because he's a big, clumsy Inuit Tornit. But
even so, that's what's so compelling about this to me. It's like, they're so human, right? And the repetition of the word race, and they're communicative.
yeah,
the same, but not. Just it's a different.
And it seems like a
different type of person.
situation that, type of species that die out because they're not able to take advantage of the situation. Monkey see, monkey do, but at the same time, do as I say, not as I do. So, it's really like maybe it was a situation where the Inuit were just not willing to share the knowledge of creating kayaks with these people because they knew sharing knowledge with these people would mean that they would be able to fish better. They would be able to get more fish, and that would cause a big problem in terms of amount of food that the Inuit were able to get. Granted, they shared hunting ground, but who's to say when you have an advantage over another group of people, you're going to use that advantage to your advantage.
And the Tornit was already physically superior by the sounds of it too. So
yeah, I mean, well, what it seems like the Tornit were physically superior. They were big, strong. They were just not that smart. And it seems like what we see as an example in nature every time, creatures that have more testosterone, that tend to be the better hunters, the better mammals in terms of size, predator-wise, aren't always the smartest. And that leads me to a quote that I like to look back on from my friend. He showed me, I believe it was Plato or Socrates, maybe. But it's those with power who don't have knowledge often lose it, but those with knowledge and without power often gain it. And it's a situation where I look at this weird little case of the Tornit race and these wild bushmen who kind of just got outsmarted by the smaller, less capable, in terms of physical capabilities, they were the less capable race of people, but they were able to engineer a kayak better than these big, clumsy Tornit people, and they weren't willing to share the knowledge with them extensively. And so that caused them to make really bad ones. And since they weren't able to use these bad kayaks, the legend goes that he stole a kayak without permission, damaged it. The young Inuit became very angry and stabbed the Tornit in the nape of the neck while sleeping, killing him. The rest of the Tornits feared that they too would be killed by the Inuit and fled the country, rarely to be seen again. And since that time, many stories have come out of the bush of hunters disappearing, later found dead and mangled, or never seen again. Apparently, hunters and the Tornits no longer peacefully shared the hunting grounds. This source comes from actually ADN.com. That's the Anchorage Daily News. So,
well, that's something.
It's really something to look at. And when even looking back in time, I'm going to end this after saying this, but in the white man's name are Sasquatch, invented in 1929 in Canada, and Bigfoot, first used in California in 1958. The name True Giants was coined by Mark A. Hull only a few decades ago. First Nations group, Canadian natives, American natives, and Inupiat and Inuits have their own names. The Inuit people have been known to call these creatures Tornit, but also Turnit, Salmon Car, and Salmon Cur. That's according to CryptoMundo.com. It's really goes to say, and I like this comment right here, Inuit legends are so fucking metal. Imagine that a kid from your neighborhood broke one of your toys, and you go and stab him while he's sleeping. I mean, that's actually pretty intense to talk about. It's really intense to even think about. I mean, hey man, don't steal, period. That's really I think that's the message they're trying to talk about. But it's funny how this story gets construed as a legend, myth, simply because the Tornit aren't there to say, hey, who's to say these people didn't get knocked down to near extinction? When you're in a climate and in a biome so harsh as the Alaskan tundra. That's all I have to say. It really almost speaks to the fact that these Bigfoot hunters out here could really be onto something when you're looking at a proto-human, a proto-hominid that got knocked down to extinction because of their lack of intelligence or the lack of sharing of intelligence with other, the lack of information being shared between other people,
Yeah,
So-
I mean, the first thing that leaps to mind is because we're not talking about an individual, we're talking about a people, a species. It makes it a lot harder to suppose that they're out there in great numbers without any evidence of remains or things like that. But this story going back so far, I think it's interesting that it becomes almost more believable if this really was land bridge days falling out between peoples or species, and
yeah,
hunted
it
to
sounds,
extinction,
it makes
the
it more
remains used for
believable.
something.
Exactly.
Who's to say?
Something that can touch on that. It goes to speak to, we've seen this happen with, if we can talk on certain people, I mean, the only thing lacking is archaeological evidence. We don't have any bones. Speaking of this, like these giant race of people.
But if they were moderately intelligent, though, then they might have a system for dealing with their own remains. You never know.
Right now, we're dealing with a human Himalayan snow leopard. They are so sparse in number. They're out spread throughout North America, and we see these people out here all over the country. That's the thing. It's not something that's to say they ran out, but they nailed and that's the other thing. The Inuit, to them, was an early style of people that they're interacting with, and this was thousands and thousands of years ago that we're talking about. To come up with a story that doesn't even sound like a myth. I mean, let's be honest with each other. No one is out here saying
Be frank. Yeah.
anything magical happened. It's simply a tribe of this person and a tribe of this person used to hang out. One day this tribe stole from this tribe. This person killed the guy who stole from him. And now we're dealing with a situation where the whole crew is all right, listen, these guys are clearly smarter and more deadlier than us. I mean, yeah, in a one-on-one, hand-to-hand fight, I'll beat an Inuit's ass any day. But those dudes got spears. We don't know how to make spears, okay? I kill a moose with my bare hand. They got sharp, pointy sticks. I mean, this is from the perspective of a tornit talking, you know what I mean? This guy's saying, hey, I'm out of here, man. That shit is dead. And they're yeah. And they're so disorganized and so clumsy, stupid people. Sorry to say that derogatorily, but to any living tornits.
Sorry, tornits out there watching this.
Yeah, seriously, any descendants of a tornit, I'm my bad. But they're kind of stupid, and so they kind of didn't get the right, maybe the organizational skills that the Inuit people had, and they were just kind of they ended up fleeing out and spreading apart and being really nomadic, solitary creatures, which doesn't really speak to the commonality of a hominid. A lot of hominids, we're like dogs in the sense that we're pack animals. We need socialization, but that's enough on that. Honestly, I'm really interested in what you have.
Yeah, I'm gonna switch gears on you.
Yeah, let's talk about what you got, honestly, because this is 1,000 times more interesting than the assumption that ancient humans got taken out by another ancient human tribe.
No, it's all good. It's a good, like we said, there's enough there.
There's enough there for everything we've talked about, guys. There's enough there for its own, and that's why for this to be our first episode is pretty intense. But at the same time, I really think it's good to show you we're going to be touching bases on a lot of different things, and anything that you guys in the future want us to touch more about. If you guys want us to do a whole episode and one thing that is involved in this area. Because,
Do our best.
yeah, we'll do our best. So, yeah, let's hear what you got.
Yeah. So you can probably all tell, listeners, at this point that we secured something especially juicy. We did a lot of talking before recording about the content that we were going to dive into, but we each saved something kind of special that we wanted to focus on, and this is more or less going to be fresh, I hope, to Patrick's ears, and it's kind of off the deep end, honestly, even in comparison to cryptids. But what this is specifically, and I'll let it speak for itself, I won't give it too much preamble, but a piece of correspondence between Doug Mutchler, who is a retired U.S. Army counterintelligence warrant officer, and famed ufologist Linda Moulton Howe. And I looked, but I would love to hear what she has to say on the 86 Japanese plane that went missing. That would be great, but it's not what this is about. This is about the correspondence between these two people, and she specifically has spoken out about this correspondence on several platforms, like late night conspiracy radio talk show Coast to Coast AM is probably the biggest. But there's a lot there. She's kind of known for this now. And since her initial expose of this, if you want to call it that, purportedly more and more retired anonymous military personnel have come forward to speak with her personally. And give their side of a story that pertains to. I'm just gonna out with it and spoil a very guarded subterranean black pyramid. So a structure that was discovered.
I just need to, before you get into it too much, I just need to ask: is this subterranean is this man-made from our people, or is this something that was discovered? Just like tell me that right away.
The conjecture is that there's no knowledge of this. If there is, it's very high up. You'll see there's a little bit of a cover-up that goes on. So there's two paths that things may have gone down. Either this is completely unknown to man and covered up because of what it might suggest for man as a discovery, or it is known to man and being covered up because powers that be don't want it to be known to man. But hard to say based on what I gleaned. But to give a tiny bit of background before the letter itself, 1992 is when this all kind of started. So Anchorage's Channel 13, so a local news network, 3 scientists announced on air that they had accidentally discovered an unexplainable structure beneath the surface of the ground. And they located it using seismic recording equipment inadvertently. They were surveying, I believe, for lack of a more specific term, when they picked up these readings. According to Mutchler, geologists had used a detonation in this seismographic study of the Earth's crust in this survey. And in his words, how he describes what they found was a pyramid structure larger than Cheops, which is Giza, underground just west of Mount McKinley. And he claims in the aftermath of him talking to our ufologist that the local NBC News affiliate in Anchorage, Channel 13, this story that they ran announcing the structure's discovery 6 months after the surveying happened. What happened with this story, he attempts to follow up with them and obtain a copy of the story, of the footage, not as part of his duties at Fort Richardson, where he was once stationed, but for personal use.
Okay, yeah, so this is all off of him, like, by himself. He's wanting to do this.
Yeah, this is such a big deal that he wants.
And I feel like there's kind of something to be said there. When someone wants to go out of their way to do something like this, there's really only 2 reasons. It's either one, for personal fame and gain and glory, clout, or simply because, too, they really do care about like what this is. They really do feel like this needs to be shared with the public, regardless of how we'll take it.
Yeah, that's worth bearing in mind. Definitely those two options. When I tell you that they denied that the story had ever run, and asserted that they did not have a copy to provide, and they knew essentially nothing about what he had confirmed did air on Channel 13.
Who's saying this again?
The station itself, Anchorage Channel 13.
So Anchorage 13 is denies that they,
yeah. Can't provide you with a copy because we don't know what you're talking about.
This is interesting. You know, I found a source right here while you're talking about from strangeoutdoors.com, and it kind of talks about this a little bit too. And it's really interesting how they even, like, the fact that there is this giant pyramid in the middle of Alaska that you could be really dealing with. And this is a triangle, like, in itself. This is a triangle within a triangle, okay? I don't think we're talking about a triangular, you know, it's kind of funny when you look up pyramid in Alaska, it brings you to Legends of Alaska. It brings you to the, you know, it's really interesting how it brings you to this topic of the Alaskan Triangle instantaneously. Kind of makes you think what it has to do with it as well. Because it's not something you see right away. When you look up Alaskan Triangle, it's not something that I saw in my research on it. I didn't see Black Pyramid, you know? But when you look up Black Pyramid Alaska, it's like Alaskan Triangle, like, is what it has to do with instantly. So, really interesting right there. So I'll let you continue on. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. We're just about at the letter. I'll quickly gloss over the last little bit there. He's able to confirm with friends and relatives who he had hoped would have recorded it as it had aired live, just by virtue of the small amount of fame that it yielded him. They were able to confirm that it aired on 13. Unfortunately, of course, weren't able to record it. But we're able to confirm, interestingly, that it never ran on any other station. He had hoped that it would be picked up by other stations after, you know, making a huge splash on Channel 13, because it's quite the discovery.
I mean, especially a situation like Alaska, you think Alaska, I mean, for anyone who isn't familiar with America in general, Alaska is probably the most rural state in America, okay? It's not even connected to us. Like, it literally, we have to cross through a whole other country to get to it. And even then, it's like you're practically not even in America, okay? That's just speaking on what it is as a state to someone who lives on the continental U.S. But when you're looking at it, like, I mean, there's a whole pyramid in this state, and not like Juneau and not any of these other cities anywhere else, like Palmer, or, I mean, only Alaska, only Anchorage touched this. And I know I have friends who lived in Palmer. That place is not that far from Anchorage. It's maybe about like 30, 40 miles away, I think. And so the idea that something like a local affiliate like that wouldn't like touch Anchorage's news channel, it only aired in something like so small.
Well, they might get Anchorage 13 there. It would be very interesting to ask people.
It's very true. I know for some people here, and we have some small towns outside of like my city where I'm at here in California. And I mean, I'm in a small town in California for like the consideration of what people think. You know, when you think California, you think probably somewhere around like, you San Francisco, Sacramento area, they have like around 1 million. Even LA, 10 million. But I live in a fairly small town. Like 80,000 people live in this area, and we have towns just slightly outside of us that, yeah, they'll get our news affiliate station. They'll get our whole, like, Channel 12 is probably what, like, the town Durham, which is just connected to us, like a little small county town right outside of us, would probably get Channel 12. That's what we get out here. So yeah, it makes sense for me to say that. Kind of think they probably did get that, but still, that means there's more people than just Anchorage who heard about this. Yeah,
I would love to hear from anybody who was around or knows anybody who was around the area in '92 that may or may not have tuned in, who remembers anything.
What year was that you said?
There's not a lot out there. Sorry?
What year was that?
92.
92, okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's pretty recent in respect to anything else that we've been talking about. 1960, 1972, 1986. We're really going to be reaching back for things like that. But, 1992, would be, I think, fairly accessible, too, for us to touch.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
I'll read this letter out verbatim, and it's a really, concrete piece of, I don't want to say evidence, but it's a concrete piece of information, which is what makes this story, despite the fact that it's not among the first things you'll hit when you start looking up Alaskan Triangle. It's what makes this story really interesting to me. There's this letter, but not a lot of attention. So verbatim. My name is Douglas A. Mutchler, CW2, United States of America, and during my service tour in Alaska, I was informed of a pyramid under the land in Alaska. There was other information concerning this that came to my attention after it was reported to us in 1992. I have tried to pass this info to others, but have not heard any response to my information. I assure you I am telling you the truth about this, and I think that this is being kept quiet by our government, as the news was buried the very next day after it was brought to my attention. If you can help me get this info out to you, please call me so that I can talk to you about this. My phone number, redacted. The whole story is pretty interesting, and this can be verified with your contacts. I'm assured of that, as I do not have them and came up with 0 from the news people there. I'll tell you the whole story if you're interested. I've only contacted a couple of people, but have not heard back from any of them. I'm wondering if my emails are getting through to them, or if this is an old story that has no interest to news reporters. Thank you for your time in this matter, Douglas A. Mutchler. So this is him after the fact, trying to get it into anybody's hands, really, reaching out to this ufologist, Linda Moulton Howe, who has since done her best to make it known. But that's secondhand information at that point. That's why I think this letter is so interesting to read. He's obviously a little bit frustrated at this point that he
no one's gotten back to him. No one's trying to really getting to the bottom of the situation. It's really sad because it's these situations that kind of make you look at what a conspiracy theory really is. It is a concerted effort by a government really to possibly silence other people with a term like conspiracy theory. When that term comes to your head and comes to your psyche, you instantly think of these types of people that come to your head, like a QAnon conspiracy theorist. You think of some metaphysical believer weirdo who believes in hollow earth or believes in flat earth, people who believe that there's a concerted effort, and things that we'll touch on in the future, like time cube theory, that something I'm really interested in. Things that people believe that there's this concerted effort by a large organization, be it a government, corporation, religious entity, any of these things that go out of their way to cover up the existence of a big event or a structure even, which seems almost crazy to me that you could literally alter a map or make things look the way they are to the public, but like only people who have like really seen it for themselves can say like, nah, that's not the way it is, you know?
Yeah, even the term itself, a lot of people would say is become like propaganda to label something conspiracy theory, you know? It's like
exactly, it is almost like propaganda. It's something that tells you like what you're looking at shouldn't be taken seriously. Kind of funny, I watched this thing recently about that, and this is it was a comedy thing that I watched on Amazon Prime the other day. I'm not going to say the name of it, but it was definitely interesting because in the beginning of the show, they gave this like little warning with like a symbol, right? And the symbol was supposed to be the Eye of Horus, or the all-seeing eye in a triangle. And it kind of tells you whenever this symbol comes up, it means whatever people are talking about on the show, because this is a reality TV kind of thing, like these are real people saying these things, but what they're saying is a conspiracy theory. So understand that what they're saying is a conspiracy theory that's been discredited by legitimate sources.
It's like a watermark.
Yeah, a watermark on the part of the video. So whenever like people in the show started saying anything involving with like in the show, it had to do with election conspiracy, it had to do with like the cabal, things that have to do with like Illuminati type conspiracy theories, I guess. But like the minute these people start talking about like secret societies, they start talking about any of these like weird events that happen, and personally for me it happens in American culture, and I don't know how it translates over in if you're dealing with the same kind of conspiracy theorists over there but in Canada. But it's a situation where like these conspiracy theorists talk like just completely out their wazoo, and makes a situation where like, oh, it's easy to discredit, but now it's almost pushed out into our mind that whenever we hear the word conspiracy, whenever we see conspiracy theorists, they cannot be allowed to have a discussion that will promote any logical thinking or any rational way of looking at any of this, because it's possibly to this big organization or entity, be it religious or government or even financial institutions, that lead people to, not want to take anything against those once they're labeled a conspiracy theory, never take it seriously again. That instantly discredits you and anything you're saying. But, I hope for this platform, what we're able to do is take things like what you're talking about, people that are like serious, people who've experienced these things, and really open up the floor for them to kind of like talk to us in a way that's like, I know I'm going to be skeptical to what they're going to say, but I'm really wanting to respect what they have to say anyway, because I'm not gonna look at them instantaneously like they're a lunatic. But when you have the whole world against you and everyone's calling you crazy, it's kind of hard to not feel that way, I bet. So
yeah, I can agree to that. I mean, I can't say whether there's any measure of truth in a lot of these accounts and testimonies and things like that that we've looked at and that we're going to look at, but that doesn't mean that we should put a stigma stamp on it and throw out everything with the trash. There's something there.
Yeah, exactly. No, like by no means should that be the case. I don't know, it just kind of seems like when you're dealing with something like what you're talking about, a big, huge pyramid, underground, subterranean, I don't know, just like really, that's big news. That shouldn't be ignored at all. Something I thought that was really interesting, this is kind of touching back, it's not a triangle, but it's a tetrahedron. And the 19.5 vortex. This kind of, I feel like it might have to do with the vile vortices that you were talking about previously. And this is really interesting because when I was looking into it, I was seeing quite a few things on it, actually. Right here in Hamakula, Hawaii volcano, there is this vortex, a triangle, one of the triangles that you talked about, actually.
Okay.
It was triangle number 16, it says right here. But I look into it, and let me see when this was posted. Okay, this was March 8th to the 14th of 2020. But there was activating the star tetrahedron at the 19.5 vortex. And this was a spiritual retreat held by a woman named Robin LaPlante. But she's someone who in my opinion, I'm someone who works personally outside of this. I work in the metaphysical community. I sell crystals and metaphysical supplies. And I have to say, this is a thing where, like, if you're really looking to like do this kind of stuff, do it on your own. Don't look for these weird people who are trying to rip you off. That's just my own personal thing on this. But journeying to the 19.5 vortex, these people who are going to one of these triangles that you talked about, they did it last year, and it was to manifest the Merkaba, or light bodies manifest, at this one place in the triangle area that you were talking about. I found that interesting that we talked about these pyramids and how they show up in different points, and how that guy Ivan T. Sanderson talked about these different vortices showing up. And I had just like seen, while I was looking into this, I was doing some research on my own, and I found these vortexes. This person's actually was doing a retreat to one. So I found that really interesting, that when we later off camera, while we were editing some of this, and we found the image for the maps that kind of show us where these triangles show up, one of them was in Hawaii, like in the area within the range of this coordinate. So really, really interesting to speak on that. Sorry about that. But really interesting to speak on that kind of thing right there as well, because I mean, that's not something that is, it's not coincidence, this just to speak volumes to the fact that there are people out here who really know about these vortexes, know about these things, and use them
actively visiting them.
And actively visiting them to this day too.
Yeah, one day I would like to really put the magnifying glass to where religious or pseudo-religious practices sort of overlap with the triangles in particular. The Merkaba that you mentioned that they were trying to, I don't know if summon was the word.
The light bodies, I believe, is what they're also called.
Yeah, I'm not knowledgeable enough to speak on it, but it sounds like.
If I could read right here, it says, north and south latitude. It is when a star tetrahedron is placed inside a sphere, Earth, with two of its opposite apexes touching the north and south poles. The remaining apexes line up on the planet's surface at 19.5 north and south latitude. It is one of the sacred geometric shapes through which energetic interdimensional vehicles known as Merkaba, or light bodies, manifest. At 19.5 degrees latitude, we experience an intersection between the light bodies of the planet and its surface as beings be cosmically uplifted and able to make contact. So, real quick, I'm going to do this. 19.5.
I wonder how many of the points of this star shape within the sphere of Earth emerging from its surface are triangles, if not all of them.
Yeah, I'm gonna see where the points are on this map because there are okay, it doesn't. Okay, good. I'm seeing this tetrahedron. It doesn't seem to have a point. Um, it is really interesting to note that when you look at the tetrahedron in points on the map, it doesn't seem to show anyone of the points touching Alaska, which kind of doesn't really speak to that theory. But it is interesting to see that Hawaii does. And, you know, I don't know of any stories on that, but if anyone from Hawaii who's watching has any, like, information on the 19.5 vortex, or if you guys are into all that stuff, like, you know, feel free to reach out to us and let us know as well, because I'm really interested in this stuff more or less, how, like, these huge pyramids, these huge triangles, like, fall into place. We have I'm not seeing that name clearly, but Loyalty Islands, I believe that's what it's called.
That's one of them, yeah, for sure.
Loyalty Islands, Devil's Triangle, Hamakalua, Hawaii Volcano, Easter Islands, Bermuda, something in Rio de Janeiro, it says. Algerian megalith, I believe that's what it says. I'm sorry, I'm not able to read all these things on this map.
I can confirm that is one of them.
So for us, we're looking at situations where it's like, it's interesting. And the fact that they're subterranean, it's pretty intense. A Great Pyramid of Giza, something twice the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza, buried deep beneath Alaska around Mount McKinley area. I mean,
that's the one.
That doesn't seem like anything that should be covered up. Like, this is like, that's like the ninth wonder of the world, you know what I mean? Like, not anything that you should be trying to not be a part of, you know?
It's interesting too. When I was first looking into it, I had this sense that, well, I've heard of this somewhere. I don't know where. Has it been fictionalized, maybe? And I thought about it for a couple days, and indeed, one of the Alien movies.
Yeah, Alien versus Predator 2.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the Arctic. There's a subglacial pyramid that they visit.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to say, too. I'm glad that you brought that up, because it was something that I thought about, like, wow. You bringing up that, like, Alaskan pyramid, I was like, wait, is this not the plot for AVP 2? Right. I mean, I remember Alien vs. Predator, but Alien vs. Predator 2, like, was all in Alaska. I'm pretty sure. I'm sorry for any AVP fans out there, but if I'm butchering that, but pretty sure it was 2 that had the whole thing. And yeah, that's pretty funny. That's something that almost speaks to that too. You know, a lot of conspiracy theorists, they say, you know, this is the way that the government and these entities, they use the media to try to get this information into your consciousness, into your psyche, without you being like, it's a way of desensitizing you to the situation. You're not going to be so like shook or scared that there is this giant underground subterranean thing, because you've already like kind of been aware of that existing somewhere in your consciousness, or the possibility of it existing, even if it's from a movie that you don't quite remember from 2000 and 8 or something
Right,
like
yeah.
that. And it's like those moments is kind of what happens where, oh wait, this is a real thing. Like, where did I hear that from? And then you realize, oh, you know, it's the same thing with like MK Ultra. Even though MK Ultra was like talked to be about, later it was described as, we actually talked about it, not us on the podcast, but as a government, I'm pretty sure we've actually like had that stuff been exposed. It's declassified documents. We know that we put acid in people's, drinks and stuff, but before any of those things were declassified, they were put into your like head as like a idea or a theory, or like, what if the government could do this? But it's being like told to you through an entity in the media that makes you think about it, and then it's like, oh, it's just fiction, just in Hollywood, but really Hollywood's what we consume every day, so it's what we use to desensitize ourselves to death, violence, drugs. You had never seen cocaine in your life, and then one day seeing cocaine in person, you'd probably be pretty scared, but you'd seen cocaine a few times on TV, you've seen all these actors and movie stars do it. You realize the moment when you actually see that thing in real life, it's actually not that scary, and you're like, oh, I've seen this on movie like tons of times. Like, yeah, I've seen people in TV do cocaine tons of times. So it desensitizes you to that act. This is the same thing, I think, it could be. It's possibly, we got shown this black pyramid underground a couple years ago because maybe the government is like preparing us to like actually really know. This was talked about in 1992. The AVP2 comes out in like 2000 and like 7 or something like that. AVP2.
Maybe earlier even.
2004. Wait. Sorry. 2000 and... Okay, so sorry. It was actually AVP1. It was the original Alien versus Predator movie that I was talking about. That came out in 2004. Okay. 1992, that's 12 years later. So, I mean, 12 years later, we're putting this like thing that we heard about in the news one day. I mean, and our knowledge is talked about that it's a situation that only one news station covered. And then they won't even actually outright say that they covered it. So
it's another way to bury something really is to make a fictional version of it that becomes more famous, more well known, and that's what leaps to people's minds.
Yeah, that definitely speaks to a lot of it, People cover up these thoughts and those like actions with, I don't know, it makes me think about this one documentary that I watched a while ago. Before we get to anything more, I just want to speak on this, and that's this single documentary. I'm not going to mention the name. I can't remember the name at the moment because of that, but it is really kind of what instituted the idea that what you're consuming every day on this platform, YouTube, whatever you're listening to this on, you know what I mean? Like, this is one of the most like controlled forms of like communication with anyone, and the most controlled way of us like sharing information, yet we're able to like share these things that are so like important at the same time. And I really like am grateful for those things. Because there are other governments out there other than the Canadian and American governments in other countries that really do actively cover up things that would to us, like, I mean, to them is almost a conspiracy theory. I mean, in China, there are people growing up without like ever knowing about one super big event that happened in their whole thing, right? In their whole history. And you could say that's a government conspiracy. The government is covering up this one huge event that happened in China. But, you know, like if America ever did that, that would be like America covering up the Civil War. The Civil War never happened, or trying to tell us that 9/11 never happened. Any bad thing that ever happened, like that we did to ourselves or that we caused, or anything that was like bad for us, that would be like the government going out of its way to say that never happened. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Any videotape that you see of it is fake. Anyone telling you that if you even say that that thing is real, we're going to cut off your platform. You know, because there was a friend of mine, I think it might have been you telling me about this, but I can't remember exactly. Someone telling me that they would go and get people online to like say, like they were Chinese like streamers essentially, and they would like get the Chinese people to like say a specific a specific tag word that would get them taken down. And those things right there. Chat, and it kind of like goes to show, like, you know, kind of proves like there are like, you know, exerted efforts by these entities out there that like really do go out of their way to cover up a situation like that. So the fact that we think, oh, you know, we have freedom of speech, we have the Freedom of Information Act here in America, and those are things that you think, oh, we're able to know everything, but I think that just means the government and America as a whole has to be extra careful in how they go about covering up these things, and how they go about like telling us that it's all fake or whatever. You know, the way they tell us that this big subterranean pyramid is fake is because when someone tells you, oh, there's a big black subterranean pyramid underneath somewhere in Alaska in the Arctic, someone's gonna be like, dude, shut up, bro. That's the whole, like, that's the plot to Aliens versus Predator. Someone's gonna go off and say, no, it's a real thing, and it's like, no, dude. They'll bring up Alien versus Predator. They'll bring up the whole plot, and they'll just say to themselves, look, it's about a team, an archaeological team finding a subterranean pyramid in the Arctic. Dude, that's literally what you're talking about. Like, whatever you have to say, it's not real. It's just something that you made up. But I don't know, really, really interesting, kind of scary. But you know,
a little bit, yeah. I think, and I think maybe with that, Patrick, before we get too far down a tangential rabbit hole, maybe we'll taper things off here.
Yeah, I think
we could go on and on and on. Obviously,
yeah, we can always go on and on about this kind of stuff. I'll go out and say, you know, if you guys liked what you were hearing, you guys liked listening to us talk, you know, feel free to check out us in the future. We're going to be doing this probably a video once a week. You know, and this is the Paranormal Conspiracy Podcast. This is about conspiracy theories, things that happen that are not your typical conspiracy theory. We're not going to be talking about the Holocaust is fake. We're not going to be saying 9/11 was George Bush's fault. We're going to be talking about situations that are completely unexplainable, even by human standards. You know, magic, cryptids, UFOs, weird science, and that's what, you know, our X-Files is all about in general. So if you feel like checking us out, you know, go check out those things. Check out the channel, Our X-Vault, and go check out ourxfiles.com. The link will be in the description below. And also, again, if you found what we talked about interesting, go ahead and check, you know, like this video, of course. Comment what you found was interesting, what we said was wrong. Email us again. We want to hear from people. And, you know, also,
check it out. Maybe not physically, but look into it yourself. We've barely touched the surface. There's lots there to read about. There's a lot of other people covering the same content. If we could maybe quickly list off a couple of our sources that we found particularly useful. Legends of America, give them a check out. Haunted Road Media, Locations Unknown, some other podcasts with similar information worth checking out for sure.
Yeah, and once again, that's legendsofamerica.com, Haunted Road Media, and Locations Unknown podcast. Those guys are great. A lot of stuff. They're covering this same thing, Other than that, it's been fun, Callan. It's always great talking to you, man. Always good looking into this stuff with you.
Anybody who tuned in, hope you got something out of it. Hope it wasn't a complete bore. Hope you were, interested the whole time. So thanks for looking a little deeper with us. Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, thank you guys once again. We definitely appreciate you. And yeah, look to talk to you guys soon.